You know, I thought for a second we were getting some KK Slider collabs on that title track, only to be left disappointed. Luckily though, this album has a lot more to offer. That's right, Indigo De Souza with her new album Precipice. Working alongside Elliot Kozel, this album has been described as looking into the abyss, a calling from the void. In her own words, life feels like being on the edge of something and not knowing what something is. But who knew a void could be so uplifting and bright? Indigo's music is usually a blend of like alt country with noise and a bit of grunge. Alongside this you have some soft synths and her beautiful voice and her quite poetic lyrics. Already having 3 full albums and 4 EPs, with her most recent full All of This End, which was met with like mostly positive reception. For me though, I think it'll always be her debut album that stands out the most. When listening to her previous albums, things feel a little more raw and compassionate. Indigo's vocals would fluctuate from soft breathy falsetto to some punky wail, and as her albums have gone on, she seems to drop a lot of elements, playing it safer and safer as she goes along, taking away from what made her stand out so much. Perhaps the emotions are coming from a different place on this album, because while it isn't as adventurous, there's still a lot to like. Something there that pulls you in regardless. Even in the opener, things feel soft with a mix of nature and electronic. Whilst her voice here is beautiful, it's these sugary, sweet textures that fill your ear from left to right that are really making this song come together. But it just doesn't feel complete. Running only 31 minutes long, this album is short. Just like her previous albums, tracks run from like 2 minutes to 3 minutes 30, sometimes just leaving you wanting more or leaving things felt unfinished. Take the song Dinner for example. You have this sort of ethereal pad and these like boards of Canada grain, and it's this really big build up into just nothing. It just leaves you craving a bit more. But let's go back to the first half of the album with the deceptively cheery Crying Over Nothing. Whirring synth pop meets Indigo's expressive vocals, akin to like Imogen Heap or something. The heavier vocal moments though is where it starts to feel like Indigo De Souza. The song is essentially about the loss of a loved one, or as herself said, this is the song about the one that got away, the haunting of something you've lost. But this is the first song where you get a glimpse of where I think Indigo's music is wanting to eventually lead to. It's very clean, somewhat minimal, leaning towards a more pop focused production. And whilst I do enjoy it and it does stand out from a lot of pop out there, it's kind of missing that flair that she once had, and this new aesthetic flows into the song Crush. Again with the sugary sweet synths adding that nice texture. Even the arpeggiated bass adds a really nice layer here, alongside this tight pop drum beat and this really nice mix. Crush is the embodiment of catching feelings, and it really does try to emulate the butterflies and the tingly feelings you get when you've sort of become infatuated by someone. And this is where I think the pop direction is actually quite good. Like, I definitely enjoyed this track. But from the high of Crush, things take a little dip with Not Afraid. And it's here we see the limitations of that predictable 80s pop sound. It's not bad, but it feels very by the book. It does get a little more interesting with that wailing LFO that comes around near the end of the song, but it's just not enough. And as we move on through the album, things start to feel like a spiritual greeting card with Be Like Water. Just like the name, you can expect something a bit more meditative, spectral synth tones acting like brass bowls, or the occasional finger chime acting like a drop of water in your Zen garden. And then you're introduced to this organ, and whilst it puts a frame on De Souza's like vocals and verses, it just feels a little out of place at first. It isn't until the song gets going that everything starts to fall into place. With this like groaning bass and this neo-futuristic harp, everything does eventually meld together quite well. But it is those extra layers that are saving it from being just another bland pop song, which eagerly pushes us into the lead track Hearthrob. A comment on those who prey and exploit young people in the industry, delivered in an indie rock glow, something we're kind of familiar with finally. This is the first track to deviate a little bit away from that synth pop sound that we've been hearing throughout. Chugging guitar riffs drenched in noise, pushing De Souza's sort of angry yet sorrow vocals to the forefront. A satirical jab at the false safety that adults sometimes lie about. From this indie rock we head back to something a little more dull with Clean It Up. Whilst it does ease you out with some soft guitars and drums, it does feel a little swamped in reverb and mid-range, making for a slightly muddy listen, but it does pick up on the folk adjacent track Heartbreaker, written about the person she was falling in love with on Crush. Ugh, I'm so sorry, girl. Who eventually broke her heart, of course. The sentiment and the lyrics are really nice, and you know, her vocals are good, but it is a little bit boring. It feels quite flat and the music is just too familiar. Unlike the next song, which takes a big left turn back into some indie synth music. And we get some auto-tune here on Indigo's voice, and I think it works really well. She already has a nice tone, but it just adds an extra layer. All of this sat atop a buzzing synth, deep bass, and like a really simple dance beat. Again, feeling like Imogen Heat, but it just really works. Which brings us to the final and title track. And like I said before, man, I was expecting some KK Slider and I got excited. I always do this to myself. But we did get the next best thing, De Souza herself, of course. A very emotional song, ended up quite minimal with lots of vocal layers and lots of reverb, sounding quite primordial, giving into the edge and taking that final leap. It's not a bad song to end the album on at all, but it's also not leaving me satisfied. So yeah, Precipice is an interesting pivot for De Souza. It's cleaner, it's more polished, and it's definitely more pop focused. Sometimes I think it just really works on tracks like Crush and Crying Over Nothing. It really shows that it can work for her. She can craft these emotionally resonant, hook heavy songs without sacrificing that depth, but too often the album pulls back just when you're starting to get excited, leaving ideas sort of half formed and moments unresolved. Kind of frustrating, but there is really a lot of emotional weight there still. I'm not going to deny that, and I think it's her lyrical honesty and poetry that really holds this album together. A solid effort, but maybe leaving longtime fans of especially her older stuff wanting just a little bit more, but who knows, it might appeal to a wider range of a pop audience. Maybe that's what she's going for. So saying all of that, I'd give this album a 6.5 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you enjoyed it down below. Yeah, feel free to like, subscribe, comment, whatever you like. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it very, very much. Until next time.